Hey, so we're already rolling. It's noon. I know people will tend to log in, but let's kick things off here today. So, first of all, welcome. And by the way, if you're watching us on the recording, as a number of you have reached out to me and indicated you would, welcome to you as well. It's great to have you here. I love wrapping up February with the Leadership Caffeine Jam Session with a chance to share and exchange ideas and a chance to work with Karin. So, our guest expert, Karin Hurt. Welcome, Karin.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've worked together. This was our week to collaborate, and I am grateful for your support, Karin.
Me
All
too.
right, so everybody should be seeing the mind map there, and a few things that are always important. One, I love that saying from Epictetus. The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you. So, Karin, you uplift me. Our group in the jam session crowd here, you uplift me. It's great to be here with you. And let's kick things off. By the way, you'll see reference to this. You will get the mind map as well as the chat stream post session and a recording. If in fact this happens to be your first time, we have some very explicit ground rules. Number one, light up the chat with ideas and experiences, please, as we run through this. And we love questions. And I happen to know for a fact that Karin particularly loves questions. Is that true, Karin?
Oh, yeah.
Cool, cool. And by the way, I was lying. There are really, other than respect, there are no ground rules here. I want you to walk all over the grass with your ideas and your thoughts and your perspectives as well. Ooh, nice tie into a concept, a core concept. So we have some fabulous resources here. I've had the great occasion to follow Karin and her husband David in their books and their writings and varying things. So two of the books, and I'm going to do something I've never done before in one of the jam sessions. We're going to give a couple of books away. That sound okay, Karin?
That sounds great.
Now, you may have more experience than I do. I've had literally no idea how to do this. So I've teed up a couple of questions, and we'll probably have, the first one up on the answer to the question is going to get it. Only one caveat. I have no ability to order and ship outside of the United States. So in order to get one of these fabulous resources from me as a result of being here, you're going to have to be in the U.S. with a shipping address there. All right. Well, again, good morning to the folks that have jumped on there. So that's where we're going. Hopefully, everybody gets the ground rules. I want you to walk on the grass a lot. Moving the map, making everybody dizzy. Hey, so for those of you who were here just a month ago, we had the wonderful Tanya Ann Chavez. Tanya is just an amazing resource, happened to be a U.S. Air Force jump master. That happens to be her on that image, although I can't necessarily confirm that that's her flying through the sky. That's her certainly below that. And the focus on this session was how do we summon individual courage to take on those tough challenges or to go after those big opportunities in front of us? It is serendipitous that we have Karin here today talking us about how to build courageous cultures with our teams, our functions, or of course, our organizations. So I really like how that came together. I wish I could take credit for planning that quite that wonderfully. It worked out to be a great, happy accident. Tanya was also a really good resource if you want to jump out of an airplane. Karin, anything crazy like that? Heli-skiing or anything? You jump out of anything?
I don't like to jump out of things. No.
Makes two of us. All right, so I want to set the stage a little bit here. And yes, sorry about all of those words on screen. Sometimes they're just there. So as we think about building a courageous culture, again, on our team, with our function, or in our organization, the goal in my mind is always this concept of organizational health. And our friends over at McKinsey have done a fabulous job highlighting this, which is effectively the short form, the ability to align, execute, and renew faster than competitors. They're a little wordier in their description here, but the ability to align, execute, and renew. And frankly, I think that's what leads to organizational high performance. Every company that I've had the pleasure to lead or business unit to run, our focus is on how fast can we learn to organize around a vision, get ourselves together, get into the market. And of course, all the great plans in the world are blown up when you really get into the market. How fast can we learn and then adapt and renew? So It takes a courageous culture. I never had the vernacular. I never had the label. I didn't know what it was we were trying to build. I wish I would have had Karin and David's great resources, but it really does take a courageous culture to do this. And you know what? It scales wonderfully. You can have a courageous project team. You can have a courageous functional group. You can have a courageous organization. So, depending upon where you're at, this really, really works. Then I love this perspective. This is straight out of Courageous Cultures from David and Karin. Success depends on incorporating the best ideas from across your business, understanding what's not working and how to make it better. And this is the key phrase here. But what if you never hear what's working well and what's not working? That's the stuff of nightmares for me. I love that. That's one of my favorite quotable passages from the book, Karin. So thank you and David for supplying that. All right. So this quest for organizational health, right? Aligning, executing, and renewing with speed. It eludes way too many organizations. And one of the proxies we'll throw at it, kind of a symptom of an organization that's not particularly healthy, is this miserable engagement problem that we seem to have, not only in our world, but in US data. So you can see Gallup published in January, our employee engagement sinks to a 10-year low. 31% of people engaged. Karin, does that sound like we have courageous cultures when we have 69% disengagement?
The other piece of that research, so I mean, it's disturbing, and Gallup's they've been studying this problem for a very long time, right?
Sure, sure.
And one of the things that is also newish from their research is, for the first time ever, managers are more disengaged than their employees.
Ooh.
And that makes it even harder to have a courageous culture, right? And why is that? Because there's so much change, there's so much pressure. People are being asked to lead with what we'll call conflict cocktails that they haven't had to deal with before, right? And so that is something we really need to be paying attention to. How are we supporting our managers as well as our employees when we think about employee engagement?
Ooh, love that. Yeah. So people who have followed my writing before know that I spend a lot of time railing at how we identify, develop, support, coach our managers in there. I hadn't heard that particular part of the statistic though. So
When David saw it, he texted me immediately. He's like, "Oh no, this is getting worse."
it is. It doesn't feel like it's getting any better. All right. So the question for the group, Q1 out there. All right. Something's wrong. Something's broken. We're interested in your perspectives on what are the root causes of this crisis level of disengagement. And I do believe it's a crisis. What are the root causes of that? So go ahead and hit the chat with that. Karin, what are your thoughts while the group is adding their perspectives?
I think that it is very hard to continue to muster the energy when so much is changing.
Mm.
And so how do you get the clarity of what it is that you're doing? Why does what you're doing matter? And when you get a lot of energy towards something and then the direction shifts, there's a reorganization, there's a change in direction. I just was doing a live online program with one of our clients, and we always do say, we'll stay behind till everybody is gone, just as we were in a conference room. So this one woman just stayed behind. And she's like, I'm not sure. We've had so much change. I'm actually not sure what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Right now, how do you stay engaged when you don't know and so I mean, we helped her through it, and she'll get the clarity she needs, but it also takes courage to go ask for that clarity, right? And
it does indeed, yes.
and I think that that's part of it. And part of the reason that she's lacking clarity in this particular moment is because there is a lot of change because of external factors, right? So she's looking for guidance from an executive team who's also trying to figure it out, right? And all of that can create feelings of does what I'm doing really matter?
Does it matter, right? Do we have a connection to it? So, and you had hit on in one of our sessions this week on the issue of lack of or strategic clarity, right? Lack of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't actually understand what the strategy is. We don't understand where we're going, and it's all shifting so fast.
Yeah. And I think also, Art, what I really find is that executives say, well, I communicated it. I've told them they should know. I communicated it at the offsite, or or, but communicating once is not enough when people are dealing with so much coming at them so fast. So we talk about the importance of really creating 5 by 5 communication, 5 times 5 different ways of anything that is really strategically important.
Sure, sure. Let's see. We've got some great comments coming in the chat. So Mark says the pandemic had led people to reassess their priorities. That's no doubt about it. Yeah. Connor, a cultural movement towards surface level relationships and a lack of real connection. Ooh,
Hmm.
I'd love to spend time with you unpacking that one, Connor.
Yep.
That's powerful. Susan, chaos and uncertainty in healthcare, higher education, our government, Al, distractions and other aspects. Samar, hey, well, good. I'm glad it's 41 in Minnesota here. So, Greg, welcome, Greg. Nice to have you here. General employee feeling of not belonging or truly valued. I thought we were moving beyond that. It doesn't appear that we have in some cases. A lack of seeing the impact, to your points, Karen. Never incorporated at the beginning. Continual work to keep them engaged. Seed falling on shallow soil springs up rapidly and dies just as quickly as rapidly. That's actually poetic, Marty. Thank you.
And
Regina.
Bo's got a manager's leading like it was still 1986. That was a very long time ago.
Well, yeah, and using tools and techniques that have their, their origin in the Industrial Revolution. So, oh my gosh, some fantastic. Thank you all for those outstanding comments. By the way, I think I had mentioned we share the chat stream, but it's anonymized. I'm not sure that's a term, but Jen makes sure that your names don't show up, and that just in case. So, all right, so we've got a lot of root causes here. So we have this engagement conundrum. How do we fix it? We have this notion, Art suggests, that our pursuit is one of organizational health, aligning, executing, and renewing. So we need help. By the way, that image is one of my favorite of all time images because I feel like that individual staring at all of those equations most of the days that I wake up, particularly as it relates to today's world and the financial markets. So we need help. We need to build courageous cultures to slay the disengagement dragon and to pursue organizational health. Any disagreement on that point?
Oh,
Well, we've got some good help. Moving back up. So, Karen, let's get started. And I think since we're going to be talking about courageous culture throughout the session, how do you and David really define it? And the follow-on question, which is, how is this different from one of, a psychologically safe culture?
okay. So our favorite definition of culture comes from Seth Godin, who is, really well-known strategist, marketing guru. He says, culture is simply people like us do things like this. So in a courageous culture, people like us speak up. They share their ideas. They come to work feeling confident and competent to share their ideas. And we like to define that in 3 ways, and this is in the subtitle of the book, building teams of micro-innovators. So coming to work and saying, is there a different way to do this? Do we really need this report? What if we included somebody else in this idea? What if we used AI for this, right? And being willing to experiment and feeling safe to experiment. Micro-innovators, problem solvers, versus just saying, well, there's nothing that can be done here or waiting for your boss to solve the problem, looking and thinking critically and knowing how to think critically to do that. And then customer advocates. And we work across a variety of industries. So when I say customer, it could be patient advocates. It could be, if you're in HR, it could be employee advocates. But being willing to advocate for the greater good to make work better. And
Mm.
so that's what we mean by a courageous culture. And how does this differ from psychological safety? It's part of psychological safety. So Dr. Amy Edmondson of Harvard, who's certainly the pioneer of psychological safety research, she wrote the foreword to our book. And in that, she says that courage and psychological safety are 2 sides of the same coin, and both are needed in an uncertain and volatile world. And one of the things that we have really found since writing the book, because the book we wrote right before the pandemic, and then it launched in the pandemic. So we have been using these tools during a very turbulent time. And one of the biggest findings that we really learned is that psychological safety is important, but it's not enough. You need people to feel safe, and you also need to have people feel with the skills to actually speak up. And you need strategic clarity. Like, so you need people not only say, it's not just enough to say, hey, it's cool to share ideas. It's safe to do that here. I'm going to respond well when you do that. It's what people like us do. That's great. But if people don't know where you need a great idea, if they are really not aligned with your strategy, then you're going to get a lot of ideas, but not necessarily the ideas that you can actually use. And so it's this psychological safety times strategic clarity, which gives you more remarkable, usable ideas.
Mm. Yeah, if I was brilliant enough to incorporate one of your images, we'd have a little graph here, right? An XY graph with psychological safety and strategic clarity on the different continuum. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and so what you're describing there, if we have high psychological safety and low strategic clarity, we're going to get a lot of random ideas, right? If we have high strategic clarity but no psychological safety, we're never going to hear anything. So we have to
Hmm.
find that sweet spot and maximize both of those.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if anybody is listening and they're really interested in that, I have a TEDx that is all about that. So I really unpack that with some very specific examples.
Would love to put that in the chat if at all possible. If not, I'll send it out in the
Yeah,
meeting
I'm
notes.
trying to do. I'm wondering if I click on it though, if it's going to launch the YouTube and make noise. Hold on, let me see. All right, I was going to do it, but
Well,
since
you
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 asked,
check on that. I'm going to read Marty's comment here. Marty, I love this. Critical is articulating the greater culture of the company. Oops, things are moving on me. And clearly, and holding to it and encouraging employees and customers to keep engaging with it, which means feedback. So well said. And in both, psychological safety must be displayed, not just discussed and promoted. You have to prove to your people they are safe. Yeah, and you violate that once and they'll never feel safe again. No doubt about it. All right, so for the group here, if you've worked in an environment you view as courageous, what were the behaviors on display? If you've worked in an environment where you really view it as courageous as Karin defined it, people like us solving problems, advocating for customers, and what do we have? All three of those, and problem solvers and innovating where we need to. What were the behaviors on display? Those obviously would be some of those behaviors, but I'm interested. Sandy, people not afraid to take risks to solve problems. Yeah, absolutely. What else do we have here? The
coming
one I
together to
thought,
foster. Hmm.
I'm sorry, yeah, coming together to foster open dialogue. So, Karin, I had mentioned in one of our sessions, I had a wonderful occasion to work for a gentleman who I thought was one of the most interesting CEOs, maybe an accidental CEO. And during a turnaround phase, he had this approach called just one thing. And when I joined the company, I saw the posters around the office and they said, hey, it just takes one thing, just one thing to make a difference. And I assumed it was some general corporate propaganda. And suddenly I realized he had built an environment where every single day, every person in that business came in trying to think of something they could do to improve communications, serve a customer a little bit better, smooth a broken process out, or whatever it was. They just one thing themselves to success. So we've got some more here. People quick to volunteer in areas outside their normal routine. Employees who are engaged with one another, willing to confront behavior that would certainly not work in a not safe environment. So many good ones. I'm going to enlarge my chat here. Oops. That also took over my entire screen. There we go. Thinking bigger. Oh, I love thinking it. Don't bring a sandwich to the banquet. Thanks, Fran. That's a
I
great
feel like we
quote.
need a picture in your mind map of that, like a big banquet with a
It's a
sandwich
big
on
banquet
it.
night. All right. People quick to volunteer. Celebrated failures, Al. Yeah, yeah. This notion, I've been in cultures before where they allegedly value experimentation, and then when you fail, they shoot the experimenter. You know, team members were totally committed and motivated based on a caring leadership team. Greg, I think that has so many relevant issues for one of our side projects there. Yeah, Connor, thanks. The just one thing mentality. I'm telling you, I thought it was goofy and it would turned out to be brilliant. So much that I know.
We
Yeah,
had
my
a client that we were working with that really was trying to reinforce risk taking, appropriate risk taking. And one of the things when we had a really candid conversation around it, they're like, "Yeah, but when we fail, we get in trouble around here." And what the team really committed to doing is every single week on Monday morning, right? The first thing they did in their staff meeting is they celebrated the best idea that didn't work.
Oh, I love that.
You
That's great.
know, and they just built that into their culture and they normalized the failure. And people wanted to be recognized for their best idea that didn't work. And the more best ideas you have that don't work, the more ideas you are going to have that do work, right? So, yeah.
What's the famous IDEO value, the design firm? Fail faster to succeed sooner.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
love that perspective. All right, so here comes one of the money questions. You get a book if you are the first one to answer this question and you live in the US or at least have a shipping address in the US that I can get it to. And here is the question. I'm curious, what's the most courageous thing you've done in the workplace? We're going to make
Mm.
it personal here. What's the most courageous thing you've ever done in the workplace? So, Karen, I want to ask you, what's the most courageous thing you've done?
Well, I would say it was quitting my big executive job at Verizon to start Let's Grow Leaders.
Gotcha.
That was very scary. And one of the so I was like inbox nine, ready now for a promotion kind of situation, right? So my boss said, nobody in your situation ever does this. Like you don't get to this point. And there were a lot of golden handcuffs kind of thing. I had to walk away from a lot of stock options. But I got to a point that I was like, this is what I am supposed to go do. But
Uh-huh.
it was scary. It was a very, very big change after 20 years of learning how to navigate a big complex organization and being reasonably good at that. Just to go out and I started as a solopreneur, which was very, very hard. But I have zero regrets for taking that leap. I mean, it's a bit of a roller coaster, but I do feel like I'm doing what I was meant to do.
Well, and the world's a better place for you having taken that leap.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm going to volunteer mine. I We had worked hard to build a company. It had an amazing culture. I think it truly was a courageous culture. Had overcome adversity, shifted markets, grown into the market leader in a new segment, and the founder wanted to sell the company, and we had a deal on the table. And I stood up in front of the boards of both organizations and said it was the single worst outcome for this fabulous culture. Effectively, I derailed that. I should have been, I expected to be fired, so you have to assess your risk tolerance. I just couldn't deal with that potential outcome for that amazing group of humans. And you know what? I didn't get fired, got promoted out of it, and it derailed the deal. So go figure.
Wow. Art,
That's,
look at all of these
oh,
amazing moments of courage coming into the chat.
yes. So, Regina, telling your boss, I didn't think we were ready for a culture change. You're technically the first up, but I'm making these rules up on the fly since you're in my program and already have at least one of the books. We're going to move on to Craig, who shared his vision of my personal North Star with the production team. So, Craig, could you expand on that a little bit? I'm really curious about that. Why was that a challenging moment for you? Yeah, Mark, I love that. Said no go when you were a manager in a room full of people, and there was a big power distance, a lot of VPs and SVPs that were all saying go. Hopefully, you gained their support and you survived that no go. Yeah, Greg, cool on that one. Led from a not truly leadership or executive position. I think it's one of the most challenging things to do. Be serving, I call it an informal leader or an integrator leader. That's a tough job. Leaving a plum academic position to head to seminary. Marty, that had to take an amazing amount of courage. I suspect there was a sense of purpose in there. Ooh, Sandy, changing jobs definitely as a single mom. Raylene, no worries. My four guidelines are for meetings. Okay. Oh, so you're posting based on the earlier one there. Thank you. Al stepped up from operations and into the political realm of the position of city manager.
Oh, wow.
Yikes. I can only imagine that one. All right, so very, very cool. Craig, you were the first up. If you're able, I'd love for you to share a little bit more if you're willing to do that on that one. Also, make sure you reach out to me for that
Yeah,
book.
and let me tell you a way, if you're someone who is working on building a courageous culture, there's an exercise that we do when we go do in-person events, and we take index cards and we give everybody an index card and we say,
Uh,
write on this your most courageous moment at work. And they do it, and then we spread them out all on tables, and we do what we call a courage buffet. So you don't know who said what necessarily, but everybody just goes and reads other people's moments of courage. It is one of the most exciting things to see all that, all those things, because we get more confident when we think about our courageous moments, because like Amy Edmondson says, you're more likely to hold on to a negative experience than a positive one. But if you think about these courageous moments, that gives you more confidence to have the next courageous moment.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. I love it. I mean, just this is inspirational to me, reading everybody's stories here.
Yes.
That one, a buffet of inspiration. I'm trying to think about one of the comments. Can I bring a sandwich to that buffet?
Right.
All right. So, question four, and this is for the group and for Karin. What does leadership look and act like in a courageous culture? This is Leadership Caffeine, after all. So, what does leadership do in this environment? We know they have to build this environment of psychological safety for everyone. What do they really do? What are some of the behaviors on display?
So we talk about 7 steps to building a courageous culture in the book, but I'm going to just hang out in the first 4 of those.
Uh-huh.
And the first one is navigate the narrative. And that is leaders have to get comfortable with how they are feeling about speaking up.
Hmm.
Because if you go to your team and say, yeah, it's safe, and they're watching you not share ideas, they're watching you back down and not advocating for things that matter. They're watching those behaviors more than they're watching listening to what you say.
Hmm.
So, in a courageous culture, leaders go first. They are role models of this. And so that's the first thing, navigating the narrative. Then it's creating clarity. And this is clarity around 2 things. One, clarity that you really do want people's ideas. But as we talked about earlier, clarity about where you're headed strategically, where you need a great idea. If you apply some of the tools that are in courageous cultures and you just say, bring me any ideas to improve the business, trust me, I've done this, you're going to get so many ideas that you can't actually use. And that's going to frustrate people. But if you can say, hey, here's where we really need a great idea, that's when you're more likely to get more practical, usable ideas. So navigate the narrative, create clarity. Then the next is cultivate curiosity. And this is where you are using some tools to proactively ask people for their ideas. Because in our research, 49% said they're not regularly asked for their ideas. It takes more than an open door.
Hmm.
So, what are some practical ways to do this? One is simply ask a courageous question. And a courageous question is it's very specific and it assumes that improvement is possible. So it's humble, right? So, hey, what is one way that we could be more effective in this project? What's one way we could improve our communication on this team? What's one way we could show up more curious with one another in our staff meetings? It's that courageous questions often have that word one in it because it's easier. It creates more psychological safety if you're super specific. Now, of course, you don't have to stop it there. Then you could say, great, what else? But that really does help. Another is our own the ugly technique. And this is 4 strategic questions. U, what are we underestimating? G, what's got to go? L, where are we losing? And then why, where are we missing the yes? And if you're reading Courageous Cultures, you'll know that in chapter 6, I share this experience from Verizon where I had a 2,200 person sales team. They were completely demoralized because at this point in time, this will feel like ancient history, that Verizon did not have rights to sell the iPhone. And can you imagine being in a retail sales team, have sales stores? I had 110 stores, and we had lines out the door, not for people to buy stuff, for them to come figure out how to port their number over to AT&T. And so what we talked about, so I got curious And I started looking and following my top salespeople around, and I ran into this guy named Yomi. And Yomi was doing one thing consistently. He was asking every customer, "Where do you work?" I said, "Yomi, why do you do that? Is that like just to, build connection?" He's like, "Oh, no, no. When I ask somebody where they work, 4 out of 10 times I find out that they or somebody in their family owns a small business. Here's the deal. People don't want the iPhone for their business right now. They're still too scared. It's too newfangled for for security
Mm.
reasons. We've gotten over that since then. What they want is the BlackBerry, if anybody remembers that, or push to talk phones, right? And so what he was doing was he was missing, where were we missing the yes? We were missing the yes of there were small business customers coming into our stores who wanted our products. So he was selling lines 4, 10, 20, 30, 50 at a time. And so what then we went from curiosity over to clarity. So then I was like really, really created clarity for the rest of the sales team. And I said, here's Yomi has figured it out. Clarity. We are going to build a strategy around small business. That, where are we missing the yes? We blew away all the other regions. We won all the awards for customer growth because we got curious and then we're able to execute and create clarity. In a courageous culture, you have that balance between curiosity and clarity. So navigate the narrative, create clarity, cultivate curiosity. And then the fourth is respond with regard. When somebody brings you an idea, how are you responding? And in a courageous culture, and this is one of the hardest tools to teach. I've got clients who are doing really good with navigating the narrative, creating clarity, cultivating curiosity, but under pressure, when they get ticked off, they're like, "That's a dumb idea." I'm like, "You can't do that." Every time you say that's a dumb idea, you shut people down and you crush courage. But you can't tell somebody a dumb idea is a good idea. So what you're going to do is thank them for contributing, not necessarily for the specific idea. "Thank you so much for caring about our business. Thank you so much for thinking creatively. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for speaking up." Gratitude. Then information. You're going to provide information about how you could or could not use that idea and why. So you're educating them. And then an invitation to continue to contribute. Gratitude, information, and an invitation.
Mm. Wonderful. So much in there. So, because you're a much better talker and great storyteller than I am a typist, ugly again, underestimating, which
Yeah.
I,
What are we underestimating?
right,
G, what's got to go?
right.
L, where are we losing? And this could be like, where are we losing to the competition? Where are we losing key talent? And then why, where are we missing the yes?
Where are we missing the yes? Love that. By the way, I want my BlackBerry back. My first one, the original
I
full
remember my first
keyboard.
BlackBerry too. Yeah.
It was the greatest piece of technology I've ever owned. Sidebar. Hey, Craig, thank you for sharing on the follow up there. So you had indicated you had, in a courageous moment, shared your North Star with your team. So you shared how you tried to provide employees the optimal working environment in your role as facility manager. Despite not meeting that high bar, you continue to work towards it. A lot of humility in that. I love that. The idea being that without stretching and reaching, we won't improve, but we will often miss the mark. We have to keep going. I love the tenacity. I love the humility. I love the commitment. That is great as well. And Marty, your comment on what leadership looks like and acts in a courageous culture, openness with thought processes and
Mm.
personal priorities, and be vulnerable. That vulnerability one seems to keep getting lost in our world there. I love that one. So fantastic. Thank you.
One of the things, Art,
Hmm.
is that I'm also really seeing in high quality, courageous cultures is that people are encouraged to say no. And, because every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to something or someone else. And in a correct to keep, sometimes you have to say no, I
Hmm.
can't do that. So you can stay focused on your most important thing. And teaching people that it's okay to say a polite and respectful no takes some level of courage, but it's important.
Well, and it also want to highlight there's great ideas for that in the Powerful Phrases book, including how to say no to your manager. So nice tie in there. And no, I mean, no, that's maybe the most important issue in strategy. What is it we're not going to do?
Right.
Everything seems good in isolation. How do we say no?
Yeah.
All right, sliding over. So let's talk about the barriers. All of this sounds so amazing. It sounds so just good, right? It's a move towards goodness. What's getting in the way, Karin? What your research, I think, spelled out a lot of that. What's getting in the way of building a courageous culture or having one emerge?
Well, one is toxic courage crushing behaviors.
Ooh, I love that.
Shame, blame, and intimidation are the big ones. So I think that is a piece of it. Another big one is lack of clarity, where you or assuming that there is clarity, or assuming that people should know how to do this stuff. I have this one executive I was talking to the other day, and he must have said this 3 times in a period of an hour. If I pay them $200,000 or more, they should know. And I'm like, okay, maybe they should know. But the question is, do they know? Right? Like, and so, just because somebody should know how to think critically, should know how to solve problems, if you haven't taught them, you can be frustrated or you can slow down and teach them. And I think that that's part of it. Even people who come out of MBA programs sometimes have not had a course that really teaches them to think critically and solve problems. And so I would say, break it down and just don't say, I need you to be a more strategic thinker.
Ooh.
Okay, how do I do that? Right? So instead, give them some practical ways to do that.
Yeah, I suspect there's more than a few people that have been told at some point, you need to think more strategically as part of feedback or a performance eval. That's up there with my other favorite miserable piece of feedback, which is, hey, you really need to strengthen your executive presence. What does that mean? So I love that. People may not know how to think critically and solve problems. Leaders are teachers. We have to take on that responsibility, teaching people how to solve problems, how to frame issues, how to look at them, what the cognitive biases are, so forth and so on. How to begin to see around corners and those types of issues. How about from the group here? What are some of the barriers that you perceive to the emergence of a courageous culture, whether it's an organization you've experienced or a team you've been on? What are some of the barriers there? Feel free to chime in. Yeah, silos, definitely. Silos all over the place. Lower level, losing lower level voices or ignoring them. One group has a fantastic idea, but it never gets out. It's not leveraged in the process. Love that, Connor. That's great. What else? What did you experience, Karin, in environments where the culture at some unnamed large telecommunications provider might not have been as courageous as you had hoped it would be?
So one is when you don't actually want people's ideas. So I had a one guy I worked for pretty late in the game. So I'm in a fairly high level position. And my boss, and I'm like working, everything I teach is stuff that I did and led.
Right.
And I said to him, we're dealing with call centers. And I said, what we really need to do is empower the people on the phones to be able to make better decisions for the customers. And this guy looked at me and he goes, Karin, I don't want them to think.
Ooh.
Right? Please don't tweet that out.
Yeah.
Right?
I
This is
think we're all
amongst friends
processing
here.
on it. We're
I mean,
processing
it
on it.
was a long time ago. But I said, "Are you serious?" And he
Hmm.
goes, "Yeah, we have scripts for that. Like they just need to follow the scripts."
Uh,
Right? Now if you've ever had a negative customer experience, like that's why, right? And so, but he was thinking, well, I've got this enormous, he was scared. I've got
yeah.
this enormous organization, and if everybody starts thinking and doing what they think is right, but see, that's where you can't just say do whatever. You've got to then say, here are the parameters. This is what an effective decision looks like. This is how you make a decision. If you don't know, this is when you escalate and ask. But telling people you don't want them to think is we started this whole conversation of lack of engagement,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Painful,
I
painful.
ignored him. I ignored him.
Good for you. Good for you. So you threw in the comments there in answer to this question, matrix organization. So I'll bite. Why are those big barriers to the idea of a courageous culture emerging?
So one of the biggest, and I deal with a lot of matrix organizations
Sure.
and our
We all,
clients,
yeah.
right? Because we do a lot of global work. And one of the things is it often is unclear. So first of all, sometimes there's competing priorities.
Hmm.
It is often unclear who owns the decision. And we talk about in our new book, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict, we talk about conflict cocktails. And one of the conflict cocktails that we and what so one of the exercises I do, and I'm gonna go speak at David and I are gonna go speak at ATD, the big training conference, and we'll have people create a conflict cocktail. Like, what are the conflict cocktails you're experiencing? But one of them is what we call the power trap. And it is when you have holding people accountable without the empowerment to achieve that level of accountability. That is one of the easiest ways to tank engagement, right? You're accountable, but I'm not going to empower you to be able to solve this problem. And you see that often in a matrix organization. I need to achieve this objective, but I need these other departments all on board, and I don't have the power to get them there. And so that's why, one of the other reasons that we think about this stuff is how do you teach people to have those conversations? I'm gonna stop talking. I'll put an article about that in the chat too.
Cool. That accountability without authority, the only word I can think of is that's just evil. And that is so toxic. It's brutal. It leads to no good whatsoever. Some fantastic ones. Oh my gosh, this group is lighting it up in here. So, where are we going? Back up here. Yeah, Connor's risk aversion coming from, so Al dealing with organized labor, Karen's matrix, Sandy. Teachers need the insight to see that everyone learns differently. That's such a powerful concept, and we have to have different options to be able to train people. Marty, inheriting generational fear in the organization.
Ooh.
So I've lived that one before where the culture was so scarred from the prior leadership and management that helping them overcome FOUS, fear of speaking up, FOSU,
Mhm.
fear of speaking up, is a brutally challenging issue there. So, Karen, how have you navigated that one, dealing with a generational fear in the organization?
I think so, people pass that on. It's making it easier rather than saying, well, it's different now.
Hmm.
Isn't enough. It's prove it. And so give people small wins. Give them, ask a courageous question, listen to what they have to say, respond with regard to what they're saying, right? Give those old school leaders some practical ways to go out and ask for input and teach them how to respond with regard. And, because you can't, what I really, really believe, Art, and you know this about me now since we've been spending like all week together, but I'm all about getting down to really practical habits. And
Hmm.
so when we talk about don't tell somebody just to be curious, right? Give them some curiosity, teach them some curiosity habits. So this is our synergy stack team collaboration system. And from this, like we take different curiosity habits. So a habit is challenge assumptions. I ask provocative questions to help us think a level deeper. Well, this is something you need to do. Then how are you teaching people to ask a provocative question?
Hmm.
So, that's where I always am about getting down to what does that actually look like? If you took out your phone and recorded somebody doing it, what is it that they're doing? And then how do you teach that to others?
Love that. What's the name of the card deck again?
It's our synergy stack team collaboration system.
Team collaboration system, referenced in the materials for Courageous Cultures
It's on our website.
on the website.
I'm gonna
Okay.
just chat it in here. It is we just we spent 2 years building the system, and I will tell you, it really is making a
Yeah,
difference.
we went through an example of it with the group the other day, and they loved it. So I'm very very big fan of that. All right, so Karen, and I'm looking at the time here. We've concluded the culture isn't courageous. Everybody wants to know. They're sitting there thinking, my team isn't courageous, my project team, my department, we're definitely not courageous at this point. Our management team, how do we jumpstart it? How do we, and I know we've been talking about those pieces and ideas all throughout this, but what's the kind of integration of the key ideas?
So the first thing I would say is there is no need for you to go out. If you're in a toxic culture, to go say, hey, in my department, we're doing a courageous culture and making a big deal about all that. All you need to do is say, where is one place that we really need a great idea? Be very clear with that with your team. Go out, proactively invite them. If there's a lot of that historical yuck, then
Uh-huh.
make it safe. Do visible anonymity. One of the ways that I'll do that is just if you're in person, you can use the index cards. Let me give you a quick we have time. A quick story
Sure,
on this one.
sure.
So I was working with a team that it was an executive team, and who was in the room were all the people that were the presidents of the brands of these five different brands that were all part of a matrix organization. And then the people who were in succession from their teams to move potentially into one of those roles. So, pretty senior team. They had been brought together to really develop a new strategy that was going to require collaboration across all those brands. Now, Art, I'm sure you have been in this, and I'm sure many of you have been in this situation where you feel like people are not talking about the thing that they actually need to talk about, right?
Mhm.
So I had that feeling. So I called a break and I went to my purse because I always have index cards in my purse. And I gave everybody an index card and I said, okay, we all know what this project is. On the front of your card, put an H and write your biggest hopes for this project. Flip it
Ooh.
over. On the back, put an F and put your biggest fears. I collected the cards. The H's were all the things that, all the hopes were all the things we already put all over the easel sheets all over the room. People knew why we were there. They knew what the hopes for the project were. But what was fascinating was the fears. I do not trust that the other people in this room are going to execute on this. I think I'm the only one who's really involved. Nobody else is actually going to do what they say. I don't trust. I don't trust. Okay. Now, if we had just continued that entire conversation, right, and just spent 2 days in strategic planning, it would have been a flop because the trust wasn't there. We
Mhm.
had to stop and have the conversation that people were afraid to have. Once we did that, we're like, well, why do we think that? Okay. So it derailed us for an hour. But that hour of going and really getting what and our we have a client in Switzerland calls put the fish on the table. By putting the stinky fish on the table, then we saved the rest of the time, right? And we could move faster.
That was one of the best investments of an hour I could ever imagine, and that
Right?
completely reset the culture of that group. So, a couple of notes here. One note to self: everybody start carrying index cards. That idea, that idea, that approach is brilliant, Karen. So, I promise you, when I use it, I will give you attribution. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So any others? I like the don't make a big deal out of it. Start small. Share your phrase. Even if we're in the least courageous organization in the history of organizations, what are we possibly able to create in that environment?
Nice.
It's a courageous,
The cultural oasis.
oh, a cultural oasis. That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
So
Control what you
focus
can
on,
control,
yeah.
influence what you can influence.
Yeah, influence. We can't all affect the entire organization, but we certainly can affect our areas. All right. So the reality is, it's all going to take tough conversations. And the stuff of sleepless nights, I'm not going to, please don't bother reading that ridiculously text heavy slide there. I said it earlier. The thing that kept me awake when we were trying to transform the organization wasn't the sales forecast or even the strategy and execution issues as much as it was the idea of all of those important conversations that weren't being had. And that was really what you were just referencing. So with any cultural change comes conflict. And that's what Powerful Phrases is all about, how to navigate workplace conflict. So what do we have to do, Karen, to be ready to navigate this part of the cultural change? Because conflict is scary. The idea of engaging in these discussions is scary.
Yeah, Art, it's really the first conversation that you have to have is the one with yourself. And
Mm.
so, I would encourage everyone if there is a conversation that you need to have, but you're avoiding it, here I would ask yourself three questions. One, why does what you have to say matter? Why does it matter for the outcomes? Why does it matter for your career? Why does it matter for your relationship with the person that you're not having this conversation with? What's then the next question is what's at stake if you stay silent? What's at stake for your relationship? What's at stake for the outcomes? What's at stake for your customers? And then the third one is imagine that you've had this conversation. And when I'll do a keynote, I will ask this. I get everybody get a conflict conversation in their head, and I said, all right, imagine you've had the conversation. What is the emotion that you are feeling because been heard? Now, you may not have gotten everything you wanted, but you have been genuinely heard. And then I go like this and get everybody just like shout out what they've been. The number one is always relief. I feel
Feel
relieved.
good, yes.
Right. And that's what I want for people. That's why we wrote this book. We want people to have less stress and more relief and be able to have the tools to have the conversation that they would rather avoid.
I'm thinking about one of those challenging cultural conversations I had to have with a CEO in another place, and I executed on it horribly, Karin. We had just actually completed a values exercise in the company and refreshed the organization's values, had a company-wide effort in it, and the CEO was maintaining the employment of the single most toxic human being I've ever met in my life. And it
Ugh.
it was so angering that I ended up, don't anybody do this, I ended up table pounding. And the gentleman next to me, who was kind of my arch adversary anyway, said, I think you should fire him. Fortunately, the CEO didn't fire me. And he ended up, he realized that it was an existential moment for the organization, or at least for the credibility of the values there. But you
Yeah.
know how I felt after it, even though I felt crappy for losing my temper because I liked the guy a lot,
Yeah.
but I felt great that I had spoken up for something that was so important to the success of that company, which was standing behind the values. So that's
Good.
one of those don't do as I did, but
Well,
definitely
you just wish you would have done it in a different way, but you're glad that you spoke up, right?
heck yes, all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was critical. Hey, so Marty pops in there with she loves the concept of a cultural oasis, a place where industry happens along with rest and play. It prepares the team for the journey through the desert, and the leader, and in caps, must know where the next oasis is and where it is located.
Mm,
Ooh, pretty cool.
beautiful. I love that
Yeah,
imagery.
yeah, creating oasis after
You know,
oasis.
Marty, I mean, that's a different angle on Oasis. And I actually really, really love that. And I'm thinking about organizations that always feel like they're in crisis. And, it is hard without some of that rest and renewal to continue to rally the team again and again.
Hmm.
There's always a higher gear. What you're describing is give people a moment to celebrate, to rest, to reflect. They will then become more energized to go find that next new vision. Beautiful, beautiful
Yeah,
example there.
well said, Marty. So, all right, so 7.5 book opportunity must be US that I can ship. Ask a question. First one up with a question for Karin. Ooh, heart attacks were not uncommon in that environment. So, a question for Karin gets you a book. And Karin, we can be thinking about it as we tie things off, kind of the parting guidance. So Connor has, what is your most challenging client situation?
Hmm.
And
So
can you
many, Connor.
and can you describe it publicly? So
I would say the biggest is where you have an executive team and you've got someone on the executive team, starting with a C level that really, really wants to create a courageous culture. And then you've got someone else on that executive team who is radically high performing, is adding massive value to the company, and is like, old school has worked for me my entire life. And and he's got followers, right? Like the thing is, his division is his for his role is working. And so how do you then have that conversation of building the culture when you have two people with very a lot of that same level of power? One wants to do courageously, one wants to do it old school, and they both have a proven track record of having success leading in the way they've led in the past.
hmm,
And that one is tricky.
I can imagine.
And and how so part of what I'm because I'm dealing with this right now, and part of what I'm doing is showing, proving that some of the courageous cultures techniques are more effective than the old school without throwing away a lot of the systems and processes of the way that has worked that is actually also working. And it's a merging of these two approaches.
Sounds vexing to say the least. So we have a great question as well from Raylene. Raylene, I can't tell from your follow-on if you're clarifying the question. The original one was, Karin, how do you change habits to create courageous habits?
So one of the things is, first of all, is to break down the habits and
Mm,
to actually teach what are the habits. So instead of saying, "Hey, I need you to create better," you need to get better clarity. One of the things you could do is say, "Well, what are the habits?" And so what we'll do with the synergy stack is we will give people all 48 of these cards, and we'll say, "Okay, which of these habits, if everybody on this team did them consistently, would have the biggest impact on building the culture that we want?" And so then you got everybody on the team. And so then people are talking about what are those habits. And
mm.
then you're like, well, isn't that interesting? 7 out of 8 of us picked a clarity habit, or no, or we're all over the place, or nobody picked clarity habit. Is that because we're already good at it? Like, and so you're having this conversation, and then from there you build out how are we gonna role model this habit? How are we gonna communicate this habit? And how are we gonna celebrate and hold people accountable to this habit? It's getting really, and we talked about this yesterday, getting granular about
Right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
So, and Raylene asked the question, is that the Synergy Stack team collaboration system that you're
Yes.
referencing? Okay, cool. And last question here, and then we're going to have to tie things off from Lauren, and that is, things are moving on me here. What do you do when executive leadership is great at talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk, and they're defensive when people highlight it? Oof, that's the next book.
It's interesting. I had Marshall Goldsmith. I'm sure you
Oh,
you you probably talked with this group about Marshall's stuff in the past. What got you here won't get you there. He is one of the world-renowned executive coaches, right? Like, probably costs $1 million to have him be your coach. I'm exaggerating, but not by much, right? He's very, and I talked to him about this actual topic, and he said, part of it is you've got to get people to really visualize the change, but then have them be public about the change. This is what I'm working on. And then giving safe ways for them to get the feedback about how that's working and how it's not working. And I think that's part of it is you got to create psychological safety for executives too. Just because they're getting paid the big bucks, just because they're getting paid $200,000 does not mean that they have all the same insecurities that the rest of us do, right? And so I think that making it safe for them as they're experiencing the change, celebrating when you see the good behaviors, holding them accountable in private when you see it failing, is part of it.
cool, cool. Marty's comment, you can lead a horse to water, dot, dot, dot. Yeah, sometimes you just can't. All right, last question. We have under 30 seconds. How can a high-performing team member deal with mediocrity, resistance to change, and a lack of accountability and responsibility? Ooh, another follow-on book.
Well, we talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
We have chapters in powerful phrases for dealing with that. One is, we have our Inspire method for having accountability conversations. And, it's really, how do you create clarity and connection in the conversation? How do you show up curious in the conversation? And then how do you move towards a commitment to
Yeah.
that? And the Inspire method is in powerful phrases
Uh,
if you're interested.
Powerful phrases, I think, is a great resource for that. Karin, thank you. You're a rock star. It's just been a pleasure to have you here, to have you with the Jam Session group. The group, you've been fantastic. Love the
Yeah, my
chat
goodness, what a
stream.
great group.
Yeah, those of you that have been designated as winning a book resource, send your shipping address to me. My email address has been all over. You can find me. Karin, thank you. And mark your calendars, everybody. So we're up on March 28th. We're back to the executive presence topic with Joel Garfinkel. And this has been a great one. It's been over a year since we've talked to Joel. I think you'll really enjoy that. Karin, thanks so much. Everybody, thank you. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. Be well, be safe, take care, and we'll see you next month.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.